Peace and hotel to all my friends, subscribers, and those who pay attention to what I have to say sometimes. It's been a while since I've done a post, and I was going to attempt to do this without placing a picture up, throughout the duration of the video. However, I can see with the lighting in here, that ain't gonna happen. So let it roll. Well, I'm just gonna let it roll like it's supposed to. Okay. I'm doing this post based upon a movie I seen as of recently. And that movie is Chi-Raq, which is Spike Lee's latest movie. Now, some of the things that I'm going to be breaking down are things or points that I felt or feel that are important. I'm not going to do a total breakdown of the movie because I just don't feel like it. And plus, this here is straight off the dome. So I'm going to pretty much leave it at that. However, I will call symbolic, metaphysical, and esoteric relations or breakdowns as I go through the movie. To give a synopsis of the movie, it was about a sister, a strong sister, who in the movie is known as Lysistara. I cannot pronounce the name correctly, so please forgive me for those who may think it's disrespectful. This sister in the movie is the girlfriend or the main squeeze of one of the main antagonists of the movie, played by Nick Cannon. And his name is Demetrius, but he's known, or his AKA is Chi-Raq. So the title of the movie is also Chi-Raq, and that can also be reference to him, and that can also be reference to what some people have labeled Chicago as these days, because the word is that there have been more deaths that have occurred to the same or more amount of people in Chicago within the past few years as there has been in Iraq, with the war and all of that going on, all of that madness. So Chi-Raq is a term that corresponds to Chicago, and also the name. Also, another interesting character in the movie is played by Samuel L. Jackson, and he pretty much acts as like the narrator, giving you the heads up somewhat of what's about to go down. All right. Other people in the movie: Wesley Snipes, who is also known in the movie as Cyclops. And I found that very interesting because as the gang leader, he was the gang leader of the Trojans. And Nick Cannon's character, Chi-Raq, was the gang leader of the Greeks, or better yet, the Spartans. And I thought this was a very interesting take because it was centering on the symbol of gang war. Now, not only symbolically, but physically. One thing about Spike Lee's movies, he puts enough stuff in it that will allow you to think, that will allow you to change your thinking. There hasn't been a movie that he's put out where after I saw the movie, there was like a damn moment. And I was allowed to change my thinking and also change my state of consciousness of certain things. Back to Wesley Snipes, it's interesting because symbolically, a Cyclops from the mundane or the lower level can be a person who can't see the whole picture or can't see all things because this individual only has one eye. However, later on in the movie, at the end of the movie, he's one of the individuals that says, hey, this got to stop. blah da da da. So now, in so many words, he has redeemed himself and became a more or a cyclops of a higher perspective, using the third eye or our first eye. Okay. There were some other people in the movie. John Cusack, which played a preacher or a pastor in the movie. And you know, that's a white guy, of course. And people will be like, well, hey, what the hell is he doing up in here? And in the movie, he claims that, you know, in so many words, that even though he's a white guy, he grew up in that area. He grew up seeing what was going on. So, that being that, pretty much the movie is based upon a sister who wakes up and realizes that through all of this gang violence, and especially being so caught in love with her boo, Chi-Raq, the deeper aspect was that people were dying. Futures were being, or future torches of individuals were being extinguished because of this gang war. And not only because of the gang war, what was also mentioned in the movie was also the most recent shootings that have involved cops murdering, not killing, murdering innocent black melanated people. I'll just say melanated. Melanated is a much better and more powerful expression when it comes to speaking of people of dark hue or people of burnt faces. Okay. This is Strata, which is the main person in the movie, and I keep referring in my mind to her beauty, not only her physical beauty, but the beauty she brought out in the character, realizing that, hey, regardless of what I feel and I think of things, there's a bigger picture. And she realized that in this bigger picture that no one will be able to get through this without individuals, especially women, taking charge of situations with the brothers who were bringing forth this violence. This movie is basically about the sexual or insexual, and when I mean I mean not, of women withholding sex or withholding the yoni, the nookie, the pussy, whatever you choose to call it, from men until there was a change. Okay? And it turns out with this movie that not only was this movement displayed in this movie, the idea of this movie was also taken from a play. I think a Greek play or a Shakespearean play, I'm not sure, that was actually dealing with events very similar to this. And one of the interesting things that I realized too about the movie was the fact it was showing the melanated woman taking charge, and also while taking charge, realizing the part that she and all of the other women play in this. Because you have to realize this. Of course, black lives or melanated lives matter. However, it should not only matter when a cop murders one of our brothers, our sisters, our children, mothers, and fathers. It should matter at all times. Even with the violence that some of us carry out on each other. So not only should cops have the finger pointed at them, those of us who look just like or very similar to the people that are being murdered by the cops, we should also be responsible also. So we should not only be pointing the finger at cops, we should be pointing the fingers at Pookie and whoever. So in actuality, this was a revolutionary movie that did not involve any violence on the part of the sisters. What I found very important and ironic is the fact that the women represented to me like those fronts of Amazonian women in the past and other women who have stood up against the violence and mindless killing and atrocities that have befallen their people. There have also been revolts or revolutions of this sort in all places in the world, especially Africa, where women also withheld sex from the men for the purposes of stopping the violence. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what's all this sex thing? First of all, let me tell you this. Everything is sex. Everything in creation is sex. From the biggest dick and the biggest pussy all the way to conversation. Why do I say conversation? It works like this. A man and a woman both have a masculine and a feminine aspect to them, or a passive and aggressive aspect. So for instance, like for those of you who are listening to what I'm saying on this video, in order for you to listen to what I am saying, you have to take the role of the passive, receptive, feminine energy to allow my mind, my words, and my expression to impregnate a thought form into your mind, so you will be able to comprehend what's going on and also offer your feedback, questions, and comments. And then when you offer back your feedback and your comments, you have then partaken of the expansive, aggressive, masculine role. We look all out in nature, everything is sex. Even when you cook food, when you're preparing a dish and you're putting your hands and measuring the contents and the ingredients, and you're touching this and spinning that spoon just right and adding the right amount of lemon juice or whatever, you're impregnating that food not only with a great taste, but you're also impregnating it with the thought, with the energy that you had in your mind at the time you were making that food. This is why you can go and get some of the most extravagant dishes, most attractive dishes, and you taste them and they're like bland and you're like, it's like nothing it's like I got nothing from it. And yet you can go to a person's house, a regular person's house, or you can go to your aunt's house and your aunt makes the best freaking lasagna ever. Nobody can make a lasagna like this. And that's mainly because of the energy and love that goes into this. That's an important factor too, is that this is all about love. This movie was all about love. It started off showing the, I guess you could say, corruptible love, or the love that corrupts, the love that kills, the love that destroys, the love that doesn't bring balance, which comes down to Chi-Raq and Lysistrata. Now, of course, the sex scene in the movie between Nick Cannon and the sister who played the main role, it was heavy breathing. It probably reminded most of us of how we have sex. Okay? Now, from the mundane perspective, or just looking at it, just looking at sex, you're like, hey, he tearing this motherfucker up. He beating that, put this, blah, 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 blah. However, on a different, enlightened perspective, he's abusing her. Any man or woman who chooses to partake of that type of sexual intercourse is abuse. Some of you are saying, well, how is that abuse, man? I'll tell you how it's abuse. It's abuse because of the fact, when you have a man jumping up inside of a woman like that, he's literally attempting to screw her brains out. He's beating it up. He's giving her health problems. There are plenty of doctors that can tell you about the amount of cases they get with women that have these cysts, these growths, almost like they have bruises within the womb, within the yoni. It's not talked about as much as the sexual transmitted disease thing, but it's happening. Now, metaphysically, those are the demons that also that man of that negative expression is pouring inside of you. It's putting inside of you. Not only just with the sperm, because the sperm also, or the semen, becomes also almost acidic. We have to take a look at the fact of the sexual energies, the sexual thought forms that are being involved in this. Now, there was a friend of mine, I'll just say L because I'm not sure that she wishes for me to put her name out like that. She actually bought the DVD of the movie. I looked at the Amazon version. And of course with the DVD you have extra scenes and stuff like that. There's a part in the movie where the strike is going on. Most of the women in the city have said no to sex until there is peace or no peace, or peace and the peace, something to that effect. You know, withholding the main thing that men are doing a lot of craziness to get. People have to realize that one of the reasons out here that there's a lot of thugging, a lot of negativity amongst some men, is because we are attempting to make ourselves more attractive to the women who enjoy this behavior. Now you're thinking, well, where there's a woman who enjoys this type of behavior of a man, turn her on, where does this come from? This comes from a two-way street of the back and forth thing that men and women are both dictating to each other. The wishes or the so-called requirements of the opposite sex. See, most people, especially those goddess worshippers, will say, well, the woman determines everything in a relationship. No, that's not always true. Now, I will admit, there's one thing that a woman has over all of us, and that's the yoni. That is the bourgeois or the pussy. Got it. Because the woman is the stargate that all of us have to come through in order to make our appearance in this dimension. Also, this is the stargate to heaven. This is one of the stargates into the higher spiritual planes. And this can only be gained through sexual union. Because sexual union, at the moment it happens or momentarily, that is when a man and woman are one. That's when a man and a woman form the symbolic original earth goddess god, the hermaphrodite. Some of you are like, what the did he just say? Yes, I said this. When we speak about the great mother and the mother of civilization, it was not a woman with just a yoni. It was a woman-man entity that had both sexual organs. An androgynous being. Now, I'm not just saying this or pulling something out of my ass. This is something that I have heavily researched, especially into ancient African customs and traditions. And those customs and traditions have a lot to say about androgyny and what we call homosexuals, which is not the video for me to go into. That's another one that's on the way. When a man and a woman is with each other and they're sharing energy for whether negative or positive reasons, we are connecting on that level where we are becoming, or where we are temporarily manifesting as an androgyny. One of the reasons symbolically for the split of the sexes as we are now was for us to see outside of ourselves our counterpart, other half, so to speak, our significant other. And when we connect with that individual, we become one. So we do that in sex or sexual union. But we also do it in sharing, holding hands, kissing. And it's interesting because I don't see a lot of couples doing that anymore. It's all about fucking and fighting right now. This was one of the things that was also brought out in the movie. And to go back to what my friend Elle had mentioned, she was mentioning that the sister, Lesistrata, once again, forgive me, she was talking about the reason why she was with him, or the reason why she was with Chi-Raq, because from a male perspective and what she had grew up learning about what the male is supposed to be from her perspective of life, he was the alpha male. He was the one that made her feel special from the perspective of what she was brought up in. Now, in the movie, she's an orphan. So she did not have an example of a true mother and a true father in the household. She was from foster home to foster home. Get what I'm saying? Nick Cannon's character, Chi-Raq, also mentioned in a scene after the strike had took place, you know, not all women were down with the movement or the revolution. There was still some scallywags, or whatever some people may call, that was still out there to give brothers some ass, because they figure like this: all these women housed up and they fighting the revolution, is gotta be some of us out here who could take all the dick for ourselves. And there was this sex scene where he just wore this sister out, and then after the sex scene, they're laying down on the bed, and the sister asked him, "How did you learn to make love so good?" Pause. That's interesting. The reason why is because the fact, the type of sex or fucking that he was giving to her was almost like he was kicking her ass. However, that's what some of us feel today what love making or sexual union is about. So he explained to her that he had learned from an old cat in the hood that introduced him and, you know, hooked him up with a prostitute or a whore, and he learned how to get his game down. And one of his first examples of sex was seeing his mom get beat down sexually and physically by the guy that he saw his mom with. So even though he grew up with his mother, he still didn't have a mother, if you know what I'm saying. If you get what I'm saying. So in this movie, they're both confessing why they are the way they are. And that happens to be the story of a lot of us out here. We are the way we are towards women, towards men, or whoever, because we haven't been given the best examples. Okay, now, this comes into at the point of the movie where the sisters who took over, or the revolutionary sisters led by, I'll just call her ISIS, took over the armory. They took over the military armory with no violence, no gun. They just went up in there, used their feminine ways of persuasion, took over the house. Charisma took over the armory. In so many words, they were in an army base. Okay? And it's interesting because you also have scenes in the movie where you have a Masonic front. And they was claiming that they were going to go and take over all the pussy and whatever and blah, 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 blah. So they were tricked and played into coming into the armory where the women were. And that's interesting too, because I've always heard in times of war, the people who can get safe passage in the war between both sides have been missionaries and Masons. Go figure. So they go up in the armory thinking they finna have the women to give up and stop this revolution. ISIS starts to tell them the true reasons behind doing what they're doing and shut the brothers up. Straight shut them up. What's also interesting too, and it was also mentioned briefly in the movie, was not only were the women striking, but gay guys were also striking too. We have to realize once again, sex is the most beautiful thing that any of us can ever experience. However, we have to realize in having sex, we not only create physical offspring, we create mental, emotional, and spiritual offspring. So that means a lot of us have a lot of babies out here. We have a lot of mental states and a lot of thought forms that we have created. This is, of course, is from the metaphysical perspective. But we have created thought forms. And negatively, if our purpose is just to get in a woman and fuck the shit out of her, or get a man, or a woman can get a man and just ride the shit out of that dick and have him come, we create sexual parasites also, who are also our offspring. And these offspring will do whatever to have us participate in those actions so they can feed off the energy that is generated. This is also why the sisters had to revolt against this. Now, ISIS, Sister ISIS. I said I wasn't going to go into deep metaphysical, but I'm going to do it anyway for this, right? Okay. That was a part in the movie where the women, where the sisters, the revolutionary sisters, were in the armory. So the patriarchal antagonists who were against them, the men who wished to have everything stopped so they can go back to having sex with their wives and whatever, they figure, well, what we'll do, we'll put on some slow music and get some of the Army brothers to kind of strip down and dance and have them, you know, or preying on the weakness in them, and then this thing will stop. So they played the music and there was a dance scene, and I ain't gonna lie, sisters be looking good. I gotta give it to them. But Isis not only represented the heart chakra in this, meaning that she was looking at everybody else in relation to herself when she started the movement. She also represented the throat chakra when they were attempting to use this music and dance to attempt to get the sisters to stop the revolution. And she bust open in the room and she was like, yo, I got some earplugs, and save the sisters. Now, you're probably asking, why do I say that she represents the throat chakra? Throat chakra deals with communication, both in speaking and listening. And also, as a self-defense mechanism, you also block out bullshit. Block out the stuff that you don't need to hear. And then you block out the stuff that you need to hear. But, you know, back to what I was saying. So she was able to give the sisters the earplugs. That didn't work. So, or the patriarchal attempt didn't work. Now, eventually, it was agreed by both sides, or the patriarchal, that, hey, we got to get this done. We need to go get her man. We need to go get Chi-Raq. Now, if I say Lysistrata represented Isis or Set in this, who does he represent? He represents a negative aspect of Osiris, or Sirius, Asar. Now, Osiris, Asar, corresponds to the indwelling intelligence. However, if we're not willing to submit and surrender ourselves spiritually, we act more like him. Only concerned with the pussy we getting, how many people we shooting, how many people we fucking, and how much money we're dealing with. How much money we can get. And it's interesting because he's wearing purple. The other gang, Wesley's gang, the Trojans, wear orange. Which is another thing I thought was very interesting. Orange is red and yellow combined. Purple is red and blue combined. So the common denominator between both is red. Because you got to have passion. You got to have a passion. Something that ignites the fire to do anything. Okay? Now, I enjoyed the part played by Angela Bassett, Queen Goddess of them all. Very powerful sister. She played the aspect that gave Lysistrata or Isis the idea. She had it in her mind, but being that she was an older individual, probably, didn't feel that they can carry it out. It was an idea, but nothing was ever carried out. The young sister, or the generation after her, had to carry it out. Basically saying that it's up to us, those of us between our 20s and our 40s, we gotta make this thing better between all of us. We can't keep expecting the people who fought for civil rights long ago, for them to take up the battle. And really, that's what a lot of us are doing. We're waiting for a Jesus moment. We're waiting for somebody to come in and swoop in. We're not realizing that metaphysically, the Jesus, Yeshua, or Haru aspect, that's an aspect of us. That's something we got in us that can change everything. Okay. So there's a standoff between Lysistrata, Isis, and Chi-Raq, which is Asar. They were going to have a sex match, and whoever gave in first will have to give in to the demands. If Chi-Raq wins, then everything goes back to what it was. If she wins, then the revolution is won. Meaning that they had people willing to sign papers and treaties to saying that the war's going to end, this and that, and blah, 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 blah. Now, I will admit, when this came up, I felt some kind of way when it happened. I felt it in my liver. Like, why the fuck are y'all doing this in this movie? But you know what? This is Spike's creation. It ain't mine. I had to look at it. Okay? Then when I looked at it for what it really was and took my emotions out of it, that was her using the power of the feminine again to play the situation in her favor. Okay? Because once she got a lower aspect of Asar to give in, she would be able to do what she could do. And what she did, she had already had it to where all the other gang members were ready to put down their guns. They realized, hey, it wasn't worth it no more. We're losing lives. Love is not about losing lives. So they have this little sex match or this sex off. And the lights cut back on. And it's Wesley standing there with some of his gang members. And then some of the gang members from Chi-Raq's group. And they basically said, this is over. We'd rather kill and destroy rather than connect with our counterparts. Spiritually, what was being said here, none of this killing and violence is worth us losing our connection to the God force. And the connection through the God force or the spiritual force is both male and female energies combined into one. You can't have one without the other. Now, I know there may be some brothers and some sisters that will disagree with what I said or what I'm saying, but it's the truth. I know there's some sisters saying, hey, well, I'm the goddess, this, that, I created you and this, and that, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Now we have a world that's in turmoil. So you're the goddess of that. You're the goddess of that. You're a bad fucking parent. The worst parent. That means if you gave birth to me, you gave birth to those same, how can I put it? Those same robots or artificial intelligence who are willing to kill us at the drop of a dime because we're willing to kill us. Interesting. So then comes to the last part of the movie. All the participants who were in the gangs, they're not wearing orange and purple anymore. They're wearing white now. White is a symbol of purity. White is also the symbol of the light to come. When we look up in the sky, and if you don't believe me, look up in the sky tomorrow. Our sun is not yellow. The sun is white. And it only appears white because there are other rays and spectrum of light that we cannot interpret yet. So we only see the white light, or what we perceive as white light. It's blank right now until we raise our consciousness and vibrations a little bit higher, and then we will be able to see more octaves. Like some of us have, including myself. Okay, everybody was dressed in white except for Chi-Raq and the cops. Now the cops were there to ensure peace, and they were wearing black. So you got black and white. That's the yin yang symbol, male and female energy. Chi-Raq is the only person that's still dressed in his gang colors, and all throughout the movie he's been totally resistant to change. When his woman started the revolution and started the sex strike, he just went and fucked somebody else. Even though he was still missing her, he was still fucking somebody else. Okay. When the preacher, Wesley, Lysistrata, and other people signed a petition for peace, Chi-Raq was like, bump this, and he attempts to walk out of the room. While he attempts to walk, he's walking towards the cops. The cops didn't do anything. But then these sisters wearing white came through the crowd between the cops, and they had the pictures displayed of the different people who had been slain either by cops or other melanated people. Then eventually it goes to the point where he starts crying. Jennifer Hudson was in the movie, and she played a sister who had lost her child to violence. Okay? So she was heavily involved in the church and stuff like that in the movie. And in the end, she comes out being the symbol of the grandmother or the mother or my aunt. Because Chi-Raq drops to his knees crying and confesses his sin to her for killing the child. Chi-Raq the person, Chi-Raq the city. Basically saying that in order for us to change, we gotta admit our sins. So this wasn't just a sex movie. It was in there, or a movie about sex, but this movie is about change. I give much props to Spike Lee for this. And so, in the end, he's being taken to jail. He's Nick Cannon or Chi-Raq. And as he's walking out in the crowd, he was like, "Hey, y'all gotta confess y'all stuff too." Basically saying, in order for this to change, we gotta confess our stuff. We gotta put this shit out in the open. Because when you confess your sins or you admit you're wrong, that begins the healing process. All that energy is lifted out of you. Being that he was wearing the purple, that represented royalty. Now we know that purple doesn't necessarily mean it's all good, because the monarchy right now in England wears purple. And what the hell have they been doing? Enough said. So after he's taken out, Lysistrata, Isis, is walking with John Cusack, which was played by the preacher. Which I would say to the extent was probably more reminiscent symbolically of the Archangel Michael. He also could have been Haruka Hootie. So he looks at Isis and says to her, "Chi-Raq will be alright. He can take care of himself." And she said, "No, that's Demetrius." So once he confessed his sins to the mother, nature, to all things, he didn't have to go on with that persona anymore. He was real now. He had been cleansed of his sins. So that cleansing of your sin stuff is not all a bad thing if you look at the symbolic representation of what it's supposed to mean. Then the movie goes off, and wow, I did not mean for this video to go this long. Okay, here's my points. Here are the points I wish to make. Especially from a sexual perspective, we are fucked up. We have both men and women with a lack of spiritual maturity that determine who is right, who is not, who is fitting to fuck and who is not. You think women are out here twerking on videos and having sex on videos because it's something fun? No, this is their way to appear worthy or fit for the fucking for guys. Men are also doing this, and men are wearing the pants hanging down or whatever, and blah blah blah, or doing anything that some of us will consider thug culture, or really ain't thug culture. It's just negative thug culture, because if we really want to get into the thug, we have to research it and go back to thuggy, and we're dealing with those who worshipped Cali. And the thugs or the thuggies back then would kill the negative ones and the rich in the name of Kali. And in some perspectives from what I've researched, they'll take the blood, or sometimes people may have saw Kali after all the bloodshed, sucking all the blood. But anyways, the reason why we are doing the stupid shit that we do, because we think that it's going to make us more appealable to the more appealable or more fitting for the opposite sex. We truly do not embrace and know what sex is for anymore. Get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. And I am one to say this. I love it. I love sex. However, there has to be an intent, a higher purpose of the intent, even if it's all about pleasing your woman and clearing her chakras, which is one of the reasons for sex, as well as for the male. Cleansing their chakras, healing them, opening them up, and tuning the chakras to the higher frequencies. From the Taoist perspective, is healing the organs, opening the meridians, so pure, uninterrupted spiritual energy or chi or prana can flow through the body. Yet we're having sex. Men now are having issues with the prostate, which is the counterpart of the uterus. It is a uterus in atrophy. Women are having more afflictions now with their wombs, with their yonis, because when you think corruption, live corruption. When you have sex, you're having sex with corruption, and then you become corruption's bride or husband.
Hello, Atlanta. This is Norman Collins. Jazz 91.9 WCLK is my source for great music.
And I'm not only saying this for the people who are unconscious. I'm also talking to you so-called wannabe conscious individuals also, because I have heard worse horror stories from women and men of the so-called conscious community when it comes to relations between men and women. I have heard the worst stories. Yet we feel that we better than the people who are not aware or awakened to what we are. And some of us so-called conscious individuals ain't that awake. We're not that awake. Some of us have a lot of shit to learn. I know I usually don't do this much of the profane words. I'm gonna be real here. Men are truly living by the sword and dying by the sword, and that sword is the penis, lingam, the dick. We are out here willing to kill our mamas so we can fuck that little ragged ass sister down the street. Sisters are backstabbing and doing whatever to get that unholy, diseased and blistered lingam inside of their ass or mouth. We gotta wake up, people. We gotta wake up. We have to realize that all of us are in this shit, conscious and unconscious. The reason why a lot of people just choose not to be conscious because they see the dirt that we carrying. Some of us conscious individuals use sex more abusively because some of us have learned the techniques of how to steal and rob prana from the individual we're having sex with, whether it's man or woman. I guess this will conclude this video. Like I said, this is totally off the dome. Nothing is rehearsed. I didn't have a list like I do with the other videos that I have put out before. This is straight me. So, if there are any questions or comments, if you choose to make your comments unknown and just send them in an email, do it. There's much more to break down about this movie. However, I leave that up to some of you. Do as I did. Come with your perspectives. Let's start a conversation. Until then, hey, shalom, hotep, peace.